Well, SvelteKit just dropped remote functions, experimentally at least. But from my playing around, it seems to work very well, and I'm excited to share my findings. So, what are remote functions? Um, Basically, they're just kind of a way to not so much think about, what's server side and what's client side, and it really builds you like a type safe interface between your back end and your front end. And it's a cool way to sort of think about things. I think it will help make front end developers feel more comfortable in the back end because it's really cool. So remote functions, also known as remote procedural call, is like kind of like the way that it's what it's sort of based on. Um, according to Wikipedia, it's a computer program that causes a procedure or a subroutine to execute in a different address space. You can read through this if you want, just remote procedure call on Wikipedia. But we're going to get into the goods here. So there's a few different pieces to the puzzle. So we're going to go through all of these options, and I've built something really simple that demonstrates them all in a good way. So we have the query, which is essentially fetching data. We have form, which is meant for really like submitting data, generally from a form. Command is a lot like form, more customizable because it doesn't require a form. It's really just calling a function. In some ways, it's kind of the most basic version of this. And then pre-render, which is a way that you can, pre-render the data at compile time, at build time, if you had static data that you wanted to, get into your app and make it really fast, because that will actually be put on, within your JavaScript code, meaning it could be on your CDN. So yeah, some really cool things, and we'll walk through them all. Um, Basically, I've set up a very basic project here with nothing to do with remote functions yet. Code is up. You can see it down there if you want to see, how it all works. And yeah, we're just using pretty much vanilla SvelteKit. We've added Tailwind and we've added Drizzle for Postgres database. Now, I'm not going to be doing too much teaching about how to set up that part. I have a whole other, actually, my last video series is all about using Drizzle. So definitely check that one out. I really want to just focus on the new stuff here. So this basic project, we just have a page.svelte, which I'll show you what it looks like first so we can kind of imagine it together. But we're making a to-do list. I always try and avoid to-do lists in my tutorials because they're just boring and basic. But the cool thing about this tutorial is the new stuff that SvelteKit is offering and the new way of doing things. Therefore, I'm okay in this case of having a to-do list app because it really does demonstrate all the things well and it doesn't overcomplicate things. So we have the simple list. And we're just using mock data right now. So I have an array of mock tasks, and I've decided my mock task will have an ID, it'll have a name, and it will have a flag on whether it is completed or not. We've all seen this before. And then we have some functions in here for toggling task and removing task. And spoiler alert, we're going to be removing these because we're actually just going to be calling the remote functions directly. But I need them in here so that the code actually compiles. So yeah, just some simple Tailwind stuff, to make it look really pretty for you guys. And we'll zoom one more time here, but we're just looping through the tasks, and I do have it in a key so that when we in the future remove them, we make sure that the ID is the thing that designates, that this is the unique one of this. Um, yeah, so very basic. And then on the server side, all we really have is the startup version of when you initialize a SvelteKit project with Drizzle, which gives you sort of like the, where is it, in server, gives you this lovely database thing, gives you the environment file, all that kind of stuff. And it gives you a schema, but I've updated the schema. And the schema, we just have a table called task, and it has an ID, a name, and it is complete. Um, Looks familiar, does it not? There we go. And, I've already run the migrations. Again, check out my last tutorial if you're like, I don't know how to do any of this stuff because we cover it all there. We just want to keep this, focused on remote tasks. So, yeah, we have that. And that's basically it. That's what we're starting with here. So let's take a look back at our docs here. And there's a couple things we have to do to get this working. So the first is we do have to add the experimental flag for remote functions. So we're going to go into our svelte.config, and within kit, we're going to add that. There's one other thing I want to do. Now you can do this technically without doing this, without adding this one flag, but it just makes it even cleaner and nicer, and you'll see why in a minute. But we're going to also add a compiler option here, and the compiler option is async. Uh, sorry, experimental and then async. So two experimental flags, one on SvelteKit itself and one on how it's going to be compiled. So this will allow us to, and I can actually show this in the docs, I think, better than I could explain it. But somewhere in here, so we're going to be able to do something now because we have that flag to do like await, run that function right in the template. Versus the old way you do it, and you can do it this way still, of course, without having that flag, is basically having the query and actually responding to the different queries here. So whether you have query.error, query.loading, and then, else we have the data, here's what we do. But this is really nice. This is really clean. Cool. Now there's one extra thing we have to do when we are using the async currently, because it is experimental, is we need to create a boundary. So I'm just going to show you how that works. So all we really need to do is put a thing called Svelte boundary, and we can put this around, our whole app or just this component itself. And what we need to do inside this boundary is also create a pending snippet. So this is kind of like a magical snippet that basically what's going to happen is whenever the data hasn't resolved yet, we're still rendering stuff server side. We want to have like a loading boundary here, and this is all we have to do so that this will work. So all I've really done is wrapped it in Svelte boundary, a closing Svelte boundary, and I added a simple snippet that is saying loading. All right, so let's make this dynamic. We're going to go into our inside the routes, and I'm going to make something in the same route. And this isn't like a magic file with a plus sign. Instead, we're just going to call it data.remote.ts. I haven't experimented with this enough to know, can this go in a different folder? Can it be named something different? But this works, and this is what's in the docs. So let's do that. So let's get some stuff going. The first thing I want to do is obviously make the tasks load from our database instead of loading from mock data like we basically have up here. So to do this, this is just a TypeScript file. So we're going to make a function, and this is our first remote function, and we're going to call it getTasks. Okay. And what we're going to use here is that first remote function option, which is query. And you'll see that comes in from app server. And within here, we actually pass the function itself. So it's an async function. Generally, it will be. Maybe there's cases it won't, but in our case, it's definitely going to be asynchronous. And what we want to do here is we're going to just return, and we're going to wait for the data coming back from our database. So I'm going to import my DB. So this is coming from the one that came when I created my Svelte project with Drizzle. And we're going to select, and we specifically want to select from our task schema. So I just call this task. I think in a real world project, I'd probably call this like task schema just to make it a little more clear, but this is all good and fine. And then we also want to just make sure we're ordering by something, because Postgres will, at least in my experience, order it by the most recent update, even if there's not an updated at field on the database. We saw that in my last video, or maybe the previous one. And we want to specifically just order by task.id, which is an auto incrementing number. Okay, so we have it. Yay, we have our first thing here. So let's go back to our page.svelte, and I'm going to get rid of mock tasks. And here's where the fun's going to come in. Instead of looping around each, we're going to actually loop around an await. That's one of our two experimental things here. And we're going to call the, what do we call it? Get tasks? Yeah, get tasks. Get tasks. And you'll see it's going to import from data.remote. We want to call that function. And I already have this set up in a nice way, because really this right here is the task itself, but we can spread that out and deconstruct it basically so that we actually get these three things: the number, the string or null, and whether or not it is complete. Okay, so if we refresh this now and go back to our thing, a couple new things happening now. We have no tasks because I don't have, anything in the database right now. This is a fresh database. And you do quickly see that little loading thing there. And just to sort of hit this home, what's happening here, I'm actually just going to add a little await in here. This is just a nice way to await a timeout. We're essentially we're awaiting a promise that is going to set an interval and then resolve after 1 second. So now if we refresh, we're actually going to see it loads for 1 second and plus whatever the time of that database call is, which should be quick. I'm all local. And we go. So that's basically what that whole boundary thing was about, so that we could have that snippet there when the data, isn't ready. So let's just get rid of that and save. Okay, so we can't really see too much now, unfortunately, because we need a way to actually create a task. So let's create that, and then we'll come back and look at this again when we're actually getting database data back from our database. Let's call this create task, and it's going to be of type form instead of query here, and it will still be async. Do. And yeah, so here what we need to do, oh, we will have a value in here. This will be data. And you'll see that because we're using this form, it knows that this is actually form data. So that's cool, which means we can do all the things we can do with form data in Svelte, like get the name by just going equals data.get name. Sorry, name in quotation marks. That's just, the name of the post data. And you'll notice very importantly, I have a name on this called name. I also don't have any state runes for managing this. We're just using the form, very vanilla. And what's really cool about using form is if someone has JavaScript turned off, it'll still work. So you'll just do a normal form submit on the page and do all the things under the hood, and it will just work, which, I think is a cool thing to support, support people that don't want to have JavaScript on. It's a world maybe that we're moving closer to with all these like ad tracking technologies and annoying stuff. Maybe we're going to see less people having JavaScript turned on. So SvelteKit is thinking about that for us. Now, there's a little check we have to do here because this isn't technically a string. It is a form data entry value, or it could be null. So one way to do this, and there's probably other ways, is just check, if type of name does not equal string. So if it's not a string, we're just going to send an error back by going error, it's a 400, and just say name is required or whatever. And we don't have to return out of here. The error will actually, essentially throw an exception, and we'll be good. And even our IDE knows that. So now what do we actually do? Well, we want to actually save something to the database, db.insert. And for insert, we have to say what's our schema. Well, it's a task schema, and we want to insert these values. And in this case, all we're going to insert is name. You might be thinking, oh, shouldn't we be inserting, complete and all that kind of stuff? Oh, we do have an error here. We'll fix that in a sec. The reason we don't have to is in our schema, we actually have a default of false here. So if we don't set it, it'll set it to false. All right. Now, I'm still seeing this here. And the reason is when I imported error, I wasn't really paying attention. Error should not come from console. It should be coming from SvelteJS kit. And that's why that was happening, because this, if we actually like dug into it, eventually like throws an exception or return. It does something that that at least our IDE and if we have the Svelte extension installed, which you definitely should, knows that we can't. So there, we have that now. So let's test this out. So this is pretty cool. A couple ways we can do this. So I already have a form class here, or a form. And what we can actually do here, this is pretty interesting. We can just put in our curly braces, dot, 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 and then do, I think it was called create task, which I realized I spelt wrong. Create task. So let's fix that up here. So we're actually just spreading out everything that has. And you'll see right here, this is a remote form, void, whatever. There's something magical happening that lets us to do this, and I'm not going to begin to, try and understand it. But this should just work. So all we've done is have, we have this basic form, and we're saying, hey, you're going to use the create task. This puts in like the things like the on submit and all that kind of stuff. Let's actually see if we can see this. Oh yeah, that's our code there. Maybe if we went into here. Anyways, long story short, let's see if this works. So I'm just going to say hello world as one does and click add, and you'll see it's there. And if I refresh, it's still there. So it's actually coming from the database and everything's great. Now you might notice one thing, tests 1, 2, 3. I'm going to click add now, and you'll see it still says test 1, 2, 3 there, which is, kind of annoying. Now there's ways you get around it, and we're going to show you one very basic way to do it. And you can of course take this to your own liking, and do it however you like. But what I'm going to do, and what the doc says to do, is we're actually going to add in the enhance flag to this. So we basically just go create task.enhance. And here we're going to pass in an asynchronous function. And the asynchronous function has some data, but we can deconstruct that. We're going to have access to the form, we're going to have access to the data itself, and the submit function. Okay, so then after that, we want to actually, oh, what did that happen? We actually want to, do stuff with this. So we'll just put this in a try, and we're going to do await, submit. So we want to call the submit function. And then we should probably put our catch here before we forget, and we'll just console log the error, if there's some kind of error. So we're going to call that. And then what we can do, and this is the reason we're using the enhance, is we can actually get access to the form itself and say form.reset. And this will reset it back to its original state. So let's save that and test this out now. So it's blank right now. Foobar, we're going to run out of things too. What's cool is I can hit the enter button too for accessibility purposes because it is just a form and the form has a button in it and enter will submit the form because we're not putting an event on the add button or anything like that. It's just very basic, old school 1995 HTML that allows us to submit that. Okay, great. So we have some stuff happening here. Let's add in, the ability to check these. I can of course check them. Okay, yay, it's working. Look, we're already done. But of course, if I refresh, it's not persisting that data in the database in any way. So let's make that happen next. So let's go to our data.remote. And we need, of course, a new function here. And we could, of course, create a function to, mark it as complete or mark it as incomplete, but we're going to take a more fun route and actually do a toggle. So let's make a function called toggle task. And in this case, we're going to use command. So command's a lot like form, but without expecting form data. It's more expecting whatever we, set up in terms of our function. So let's do command. Now, something that's interesting about command is there's like this validation thing, and I haven't dug into this too much right now, but if we don't care about, the validation of it, we can actually just type in unchecked here inside a string, and it won't actually, worry whether the data coming back is valid. That's something I might cover in another video, but this is all good. And let me just get this set up here. So then this is actually the callback function, and we can pass in, something like an ID here, and I'm going to say it's a number. And in here, we need to get basically the task that of the ID that we pass into the function. So to do that, we're going to say something like items equal await, and we'll do db.select. And what we want to do is from our task, just like we're doing, this is basically the exact same code here. But specifically, we want to add a where clause here. All we really care about is whether or not something is equal. So we're going to use the EQ function, and that comes from where is it? It comes from drizzle ORM, and we essentially want to say where the task.id column is equal to this ID that we're passing in, and we should be good there. Now, technically, if I'm not mistaken, this could actually be a string at this case. I'm actually not sure. Um, Maybe we can look at that, as like a fun thing. What I'm going to do is not even, I'll keep it as number, but I'm going to wrap this just in a number here, like we kind of did in the last video, just to be like, hey, this is, cast this to a number in case it comes in as like 1 as a string, because that would create a major error. So now what we would do is we could look at the first item and all that kind of stuff. But a fun trick you can do, because this is going to return a list, right? When we do these things, even though we know it will only be 1 because the ID is a unique thing, what we can actually do is deconstruct the list and just say item. There's only going to be 1 in there. This is just a little bit easier for us to work with. Then we should check to make sure that item exists, because in theory, the list could be empty. There might not be anything in there. If, maybe 2 people are using this at the same time and 1 got deleted already, who knows? But we want to make sure it's there. And then basically what we're going to do is run another query here, and we can do db.update our task. We want to set a value, and here we want to set is complete to whatever the item.isComplete is, but we want to negate it, right? We want the opposite of it. Okay, great. And then we can go where, and we kind of have to have this exact same thing here. So we're doing 2 queries. Now, those who think this is inefficient, you're probably right in some ways. This could be done with 1 query with raw SQL. There's definitely ways in Postgres to essentially update something by doing a function, but that's kind of out of the scope of this, and we're not going to worry about this. This is totally fine. We're going to select it, and we're really just selecting it so we know, whether it's been completed or not, and then we're going to go back. So there we go. We have toggle task. So let's go here, and I'm going to remove this fake function I made, and we'll get an error now. But now we can just import the correct toggle task from data.remote. And let's go like that, and let's save, and let's go and check it off. We see we get this cool thing. That strikeout that's just because on Tailwind we're adding a class if it is completed. But the real thing I'm trying to show here is if I refresh, it still remembers, and if I uncheck this one, it still remembers. Now, if you're having this weird thing happen, because I did originally where I would check something and it would go to like a different spot, that's why I added the key right here using the ID so that they always, stay in the order. And I think even more importantly is making sure when you do the query, you're ordering by that, because when this query gets called a second time, Postgres might send it back in a different order based on the metadata of when it was updated. So yeah, just those two gotchas. If you have that, which you might have, definitely do that. Okay, cool. So we have that. Let's also add a remove task, because why not? This isn't going to be very different from toggle task. It's actually simpler. We're going to have remove task. And this is also going to be a command that's going to be unchecked. And basically, actually, I'm just going to copy this whole thing here and put it here because it's the same thing. And in this case, this is going to do one query. We're just going to await db.delete. And here we have to pass in the task query. That's the table we want to talk to. And we're just going to, in this case, delete. And we just have to say where. And this will be the exact same where clause we had here. So let's keep this simple and paste it in. And similarly over here, we're going to remove our remove task and we're going to import it properly. All right, let's go back and let's refresh. So now clicking this should remove the task, and it definitely does. We can remove again, and we can add a new one, and everything's cool. So great. That's the main things I want to cover. Now there's one more remote call we can do, which is the pre-render. Now pre-rendering, this actually happens at build time, at compile time, at when you're actually deploying it. So it shouldn't be used for really super dynamic data. But say you're using something like Sanity Studio or something like that, and you have sort of CI/CD that when you make a change to your Sanity stuff, it actually redeploys your SvelteKit app. Just as some random example I came up with right now, that could be a good use case because we know we're going to be rebuilding and redeploying when a change happens, and instead of it making a client side or even a server side call at runtime to get data from the CMS, we can actually get it at the time of the compiling, at the initial startup basically, and have it pre-rendered. And that's going to be part of our JavaScript code. That's going to be something that can be hosted on a CDN, meaning you're going to get a really fast website if you make this change. So the example I'm going to use is super useless for this. I just couldn't think of a good one for a to-do list, but it's going to get the point across. So we have something called my tasks, which is some hard-coded data here. Now imagine this was something that we wanted to be dynamic at the time of build time. Just I don't know why, but let's just say we did. We're going to have a new task, and this is going to be called get title. So export const get title equals, and we're going to use now the pre-render. Pre-render, which again comes from our same thing. So we're now using all four of them: command, form, pre-render, and query. And here, all we really need to do is pass in a function. And we'll make this async because that just kind of makes sense. And let's return something like my tasks. And I'll just put some exclamation marks so we know it's really working. And then what we can do in our page.svelte is actually have a wait get title, and we'll need to import that. So let's just do this. We'll import from data.remote. So you'll see we're importing, all these lovely tasks here, and we're going to save this. And now, if we refresh, we actually have that. So this is now, being pre-rendered again, not like this was just like a page.server sort of thing where at runtime or at request time it's going to do it. This actually becomes part of the Svelte payload compiled code sort of thing. So that's kind of cool. This was not a good use case for this. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely real use cases for this, as I was mentioning, maybe like from a CMS or something. But it's a cool thing, and I obviously wanted to cover all four. Is that how many there are? Four of these remote procedural call options. Yeah, so kind of cool. Definitely, check out the code on GitHub and let me know in the comments, if there's any things that I missed that would be worth checking out or things we could do with this. Now, I did want to make mention that I'm using Postgres here. This is not this what I'm showing. That's just an example. This could be another database that we're doing. It could be an API call you're making. It could be some kind of LLM integration. Anything. It doesn't really care whether you're using Postgres or anything like that. It's really just, the marriage of like the client side and server side. So keep that in mind. This isn't, specifically a Postgres thing. And in fact, if you're interested in Drizzle and Postgres, definitely check out my last video, 2 videos, because I cover that in greater detail. And if you're really interested and like that series, maybe you can update it to use this new stuff, because that would definitely be pretty easy to do. I'm actually interested to do that. I think the code would be a lot cleaner and simpler to work with. But you know, I'm probably not going to do that because I got other things to do. Again, please, as always, like, subscribe, tell your friends. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.